Hi, Richard.
Hello.
How are you?
Good.
Good.
Perfect.
Yeah. I hear you've been out in the forest.
Yes, I always have a walk in the afternoon, but it's dark now already, you know.
Yeah.
Of course, it's very, very early dark now, and I didn't know when I come back, but I'm always out in the forest every day, 1 or 2 hours. So just for having some fresh air, you know.
And do you actually live on or near to the Manchester estate?
Yes. It's an estate here, one of my two estates we have. It's in the mountains here in the Eastern Alps, not far away from Vienna. I'm here on about 650 meters altitude, and my forests go up to 1,500 meters. Wow. It's a typical mountain forest of Austria, what I'm running. Since 50 years I'm running it, actually.
Yeah, right. Well, I'm at 500 feet in Leitrim.
Yes. Where are you actually? Where are you in Ireland?
County Leitrim, near to Ballinamore in South Leitrim.
Okay.
I would say if you draw a line between Enniskillen and Longford, we'd probably be halfway between those.
I see. Because my wife has a place in Castle Townsend, you know.
Right.
So we are very often, my wife more even since 60 years. She has a place in Castle Townsend near Skibbereen. That's our Irish home place, so to say.
Yeah. That's Cork isn't a county that I know very well. It's a good 4.5 hours. It'll probably be nearly 5 hours drive from me down there in Skibbereen.
Yeah, I see. Yeah. So what's your situation, or how do you come to the tree festival? Just give to know. Tell me what's going on.
It's a long story, and I'll try and be brief. I moved to Ireland with my family just over 29 years ago, and we moved up to Leitrim. We bought a small farm, just about 9 acres of land, early in 1992. The land that we bought, there was an old farmhouse, some outbuildings, and very few trees, other than a Norway spruce shelter belt around the house and a few ash alleys in the ditches. There was very few trees, but I always wanted trees because I love trees. My background is in, I suppose, in conservation work, but in hedgerow management particularly. So on the farm over the years, we've planted up hedgerows, but planted up trees. I planted up a small block of woodland under the grant scheme back in 1994. It's just 3/4 of an acre. It was done under a special local project organised by CRON, the NGO. Basically, the Forest Service inspector came out and said, "This is a Sitka spruce site," and I said, "If it's spruce or nothing, it'll be nothing, and I'll plant it my own way in my own time." And
good.
With a bit of pressure, he finally agreed, because it was a special project, to plant 50% oak and a 50% diverse mixture. 50% oak, which is a mixture of sessile oak and red oak.
Yeah.
And the rest is a mix of all sorts of different things. Things of my own, just to see how they go over time. So there's everything from beech, sycamore would be in there, ash.
Yeah.
Also, I would have north of Foulkes, the southern beech. I would have Robinia pseudoacacia, the black locust. I put a few of those in, and only one of them has kept going. I also have two Acer saccharinum, the sugar maple, and they've done really, really well. They've really taken place. In terms of volume, they've probably grown better than anything, to be honest. Just waiting for a cold alpine winter, and I might be able to tap them for some maple syrup, which would be a nice thing to do.
Yeah. We don't have it here.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously it's not a native tree to Ireland, but I had a friend who had a small tree nursery that was growing all sorts of different things, and I things to see how they grow, and that's what I've done. But I've hedgerows around the place as well. But I know in terms of how I came to this tree festival, Natalia contacted me because I've been sort of quite active in terms of supporting Save Leitrim and the work that they've been doing on forestry, because you're probably aware that Leitrim has been very heavily targeted for Sitka spruce plantations. And I know I spend a lot of my time sort of in a defensive mode against that. And what Natalia said is, you know, we need to look at the way forward. How do we move away from where we are, and how something that's more sustainable? And I suppose that's it's a good question. It's always a good question. The right answer to any criticism that you give of something is to put forward an alternative suggestion. And
yeah, that's what has been our idea as well. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I was aware. I think, I don't know whether the group knew about you, but I remember watching Ian Wright, or the video Habitats with yourself, and Ian saying, well, you know, what you're doing down there is shining a torch into the dark tunnel and saying, look, this is a different way that we can go about this. You know, there are options here. Your experience. I mean, maybe you could tell me a little bit about the experience that you've had with the Manch project.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to. My wife Julienne is also near, because she has been also the key. She owns the house in Ireland, and when I came to Ireland now 22 years ago, we realized with friends, also environmentalists, Ian Wright, you know him from the Habitat, that I immediately as a forester saw that this is not really the method of reforestation in an island like Ireland. You know, it is so far away from the indigenous tree mixture, and with all the respect of having some fast-growing biomass or whatever, a startup, you know, that's always thinkable, but you cannot have it as a single project and single strategy. And when you look around, you see in Ireland, for us, it is just unimaginable what's going on. So I got involved also by Ian. He was kind of kickstarting and putting me into it, and us into it, my wife and myself. And we were looking around, and then we thought, what shall we do? And it's already many years ago. And then the proposal was, let's make an alternative, a showpiece for Ireland, to show what could be done, what should be done, how it grows, and so an alternative. And it was, I think, 15 years ago when there was an FAO 2002 in Ennis. There has been a big conference of the FAO, which is Food and Drug Organization. They have a forestry branch, you know, in Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO. They are in Rome, and they have a forest meeting every year. And it was in Ennis in 2002, and I engaged. I raised my hand and said, should I make a speech there, or would it be, because I've been running the Austrian state forest, I've been running the Liechtenstein family forest. Besides the 50 years I'm managing this here, I wouldn't say that everything has been always right what we were doing, which was also always our approach, you know. It was also a proposal, look, learn from our mistakes, something like that. So we went to Ennis, and there were 500 forest research people from all over the world, you would say. And I gave a careful but critical speech, and I just told them, look, that's not the way how you should go. And we also made mistakes, just learn also from our mistakes, but it's impossible what you do. Then there was silence between the 500 people, and then the head of culture, I don't explain it right, culture said, Richard, if we would have known what you say, we wouldn't have invited you. That was so it was actually a big scandal, but we went home and we had our message out. But then we approached them. What was his name, Julienne?
I don't know.
Yeah, he's still
dinosaur. Anyway.
One of the dinosaurs of culture. And we approached him and we said, look, what we do. We went to the Forest Service. We had a contact with Greenbelt, and we found an estate owner, difficult guy, of Manch Estate on the Bandon River, which is, so to say, a little, it's not enough covered in the film, because that should have been, to our feeling, more the focus, because then there was a plantation on 30 hectares, and this is now trees of 5-6 meters high, and we just tried to make a mixture which could be an example for Ireland. And I think this plantation, as it has been done, is a single experience place in Ireland. We founded the Natural Forest Foundation, and we were financing it, and I would say 80% of the financing came from my wife and still comes from my wife. We had Joe Walsh, a former agriculture minister, and we had Franz Fischler, who was a commissioner in the European Union, and he has been my first boss in Austria when I was CEO of the state forests, because he was Minister for Agriculture and Forestry in Austria. So we had them over, they planted the tree, and since then this has been kind of a showpiece. Schools were coming, and the culture was just ignoring it. The state, I would say the Forest Service plus. Then what we did 2 or 3 years later, I said, okay, let's go on to Austria. I lead you around in Austria, because in Austria, forests are owned by 50,000 farmers. And look at the farm in Austria, what a farmer is doing, because the farms in Austria, many have, or they have meadows and cows, or they have fields, but they always have forests also. And forest is a very important income for Austrian farmers. So we made an excursion. I organized it. We invited a busload of people, and there was also the forest, the agriculture lobby organization, the Forest Service and culture, and we were driving around in Austria. We had great fun and good food, and saw interesting examples. And when we had a discussion in the evening, the ending was always that the Forest Service or culture said, yes, Richard, in Austria, but Ireland, you know. So that was the end. It was not really coming down to the place. What I have to say, in Ennis in 2002, there was also excursions. And we were meeting farmers who were quite on board with the philosophy, what we said, look, the farmers, if they have a place which is not so good for farming, just have forests, you know. And there were some farmers really with the same philosophy. They said, yes, we are happy, we planted trees, and you know, it's a working place, it's an income, it's the best you can do. Because farming and cattle farming and milk farming is anyhow, and beef farming is anyhow a little bit in a situation where we have discussions, if you might agree, worldwide. It's in connection with nutrition and everything. So that's where we're coming from. Now, the INFF and Manchester State is still run by Killian Logan, and he is a very, very good guy, because he is an NGO in Europe with already a lot of attention, and my wife is also supporting him actively, and we always meet him when we come to Ireland, and he is so to say now the head of the INFF. In Manchester State there's not a lot going on. It's there, and I was watching it lately. I wouldn't say it's managed very, very actively, positively, but it is a good showpiece. And that's how we came to Irish forestry. It's not that we want to say we know what forestry is and you don't know. We just say we have our forest history, we have made our mistakes. I'm now since 71 running our family estate, and a lot of things I did in 70s, 80s I wouldn't do nowadays. We are changing tree mixture and everything. We are following the flow, but we still have a very, very good, very active, very good, very fertile forestry with trees up to 160 years old, you know. Yeah. Our tree rotation is 100 years, you know, but we do planting, we do a lot of natural insemination, which is working very well here, and we do additional mixture planting, we do thinnings and harvesting. And it's a very good workplace, and it works very well, let's say. That's how I come to forestry. Besides of the jobs I had, it took some attention in Austria, and not only because the state forests where I've been CEO is one of the biggest forests in Europe. It's 1.9 million acres. It's 11% of the Austrian surface. It's ski resorts, it's mountains with 3,000 meters, it's lakes, it's rivers, it's whatever, it's national parks, whatever you have. So and the way I was managing it had quite some attention in Europe, in European state forests. And now I'm back home, running family forest, owned by my children, but I'm very active with a very good forester, and that's the point. And I get always once in a while involved in forest strategy discussions. That's why I very much like to be ready, and I think it's very nice to know you and people who are besides our bunch in Ireland, who are on the strategy and on the activity, on the NGO activity of changing the Irish forestry structure, because it's a catastrophe. It's a catastrophe. It's not a catastrophe to have Sitka spruce. It's a catastrophe to have it as a strategy, as a national strategy. That's the catastrophe. And we are talking about bogs. We are talking, we are talking about windfalls. If you look, nobody would ever walk in the Sitka forest. It's not possible. But it has some. Yeah, it has some benefit, and it's necessary. If you start from zero like Ireland, I also would do some of these species, yeah. But it's impossible the way they are doing it. And I'm big criticizing culture as a structure, as a legal structure, as a commercial structure. It is a state in the state. It never, when I was CEO in the Austrian State Forest, and if I would have a cough in the evening, it would have been discussed in the morning in the parliament, That's the way of transparency I had to do, because everybody knew this is the biggest asset of Austria. It's so important for environment and everything that you cannot just put it aside and say, well, that's a company and they are selling their timber through a Swiss agency, I mean, it's just, that really would not be possible legally in Austria. They would be at the courts, And the problem is always from the top, If you have a legal structure that people, managers, are running a public entity like their private entity, with no real checkup by the parliament, it's
no
not
accountability.
No accountability. It's not possible. That's the key problem of it,
I agree. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about is I mean, Quilcher, I don't know if you're aware, was set up by an act of government in 1988, and its mandate is to make money for the state. It doesn't have a mandate to look after biodiversity. It doesn't have a mandate to provide recreation or all the wider benefits of forestry. And I thought there was an opportunity through the last government with the Greens in power for that act of government to be reviewed and to give Quilcher a broader mandate. And in Ireland, I think they own 7.5% of the land area.
Yeah.
7.5% of the land area managed solely in order to make money. One of the things I always like to try and put into context is in 1988, when that act was introduced, the word biodiversity hadn't even been put into print. And now we're in a biodiversity emergency, and we have this a state company, effectively a state company, that doesn't even have biodiversity effectively on its agenda. The only reason that they are looking into biodiversity is because they need it to keep their certification through PEFC and through FSC. But
I don't understand, excuse me if I interrupt, I don't understand in this context the FSC, because to my extent, if I talk it in Austrian terms, they're just buying everybody whom they want to have on board to have improvement, because the FSC, I don't understand the FSC, not at all, that they are doing that. And it's a problem from the top. Yeah. And the question is, do you have somebody in parliament who is understanding? Because I have the feeling the culture is just buying everybody, is engaging everybody who is getting nasty, or I do not understand why they can act how they act without any accountability, without the parliament getting involved. I do not understand.
I find it difficult, as I say, when there is an opportunity to examine the law and to review the law, that it isn't done, and it does make you think that there is the forest industry in Ireland does seem to have a lot of pressure. And one thing that I am aware of back in when Bertie Ahern was the Taoiseach.
Yeah.
There was an attempt then to sell off Quilcher.
Yeah.
To basically to privatise it.
That's Bertie. That's Bertie.
I think there's still vested interests there who still see the possibility of privatising Quilcher as an option to get involved in, and that's why change isn't occurring, because people are still keeping the little nest egg nicely primed for when they can turn it from a state asset into a private asset. But that's a personal opinion. One of the things, just in terms of the Austrian experience again, then one thing that I would love to see is Quilcher engaging with communities, and rather than managing the forests on this commercial basis, to set up little community councils where local areas, Quilcher, who have the silvicultural knowledge and expertise, but they don't understand what is required by the people in the community, and working with the community to provide something that provides a level of income, but also provides the other services that forests can provide for the community in terms of well-being, in terms of recreation and all of those things. And at the moment it's done, but it's done in a very, as you say, in a very much a top-down way, in that Quilcher sort of control everything. It's not a participatory system that you want to sort of from the ground up, and that would be something. But I'd be very interested in terms of, and before I came to this, I scribbled a few key words down that I thought, if we're looking at where we are, which I think we both agree is a broken system in Ireland, it isn't a system that is in any way sustainable in the long term.
No.
So we need to have a vision of what could be sustainable, and we need to have a model for how we transition from where we are to where we need to be. And a few key words came down to me. Community was one, that we need to have much more community involvement in producing that vision for the future. Diversity is another key word that I think, I mean, there is, the forest industry now would say, oh, well, we're not planting 100% Sitka spruce anymore. What they're planting is 90% Sitka spruce, yield class 26, and 10% older, yield class 8 or 10. So after 30 years, you still have 97% of the biomass as Sitka spruce. And, you know, there really isn't any meaningful move to genuinely diverse forestry systems. It's still a sort of a plantation, an industrial model of plant them, chop them down, plant them again, chop them down again. There's very little in the way of movement towards continuous cover forestry. They're nice little aside projects, you know, something that oh, look, we're doing this, and
window dressing.
Yeah, exactly. There's two other words that I wrote down. One is energy, because I think you know, the foresters in Ireland would talk about the forestry being sustainable, and I put two questions there. Is using fossil fuels sustainable, which we know the answer is no, and is the Irish forestry system dependent on fossil fuels? And we know the answer is yes. So how is this industry that we have going to fuel itself in 30 years' time when there are no fossil fuels to use? That's a question. We've built the whole forestry structure in Ireland on a high volume, high energy intensity product. You know, it's not just you know, it's energy to harvest it, energy to transport it. The timber is of such poor quality that you end up having to pulverize it back down to its constituent parts and then reconstitute it, all of which take energy again. And we need to be moving away to less energy intensive systems, or systems of forestry. And the other word was imagination, because I think it's where the Irish system falls down, that it's got into a tunnel vision of Sitka spruce is the only species that can produce a viable economic yield, and everybody's channeling their economic interests down that one avenue instead of using imagination to see how you can use forests to provide the range of benefits that forests can. In Ireland, one of the things I find most disappointing about, and very much about Quilcher, is they have they say that their forests are multi-use, but they don't. They really break everything down. This area here is for timber production, this area is for biodiversity, and this area is for recreation. Well, a forest could be all of three things at the same time.
Sure.
And should be all three things at the same time.
Sure.
You know, how do we move from that to
You know,
compartmentalized thinking?
You know, if you ask me, I always come back to the top. I think the problem is you can only change from the top. And we have a saying in German, the fish is stinking from the top, from the head, you know. That means, that's the problem. The problem is that all what you say has to be implemented by the top management of culture. And the question is, how can you influence the thinking of the top management, or how can you influence the rules by whom the top management is working? And I think there is a lot of effort to be going into that, because all what you tell me is operational, but it has to have a sponsor from the top. The sponsor from the top has to be the top management. It should be in the rules of the top management. And the question is, can you NGOs who are interested in this kind of thing get together and make a proposal for rules of the top management? You know, I think that would, and if you find public interest or parliamentary interest for it, I think that would be the key to really change something, you know. You can have maybe some local attention by culture people because there is somebody who is interested, you know. You also have good foresters in culture, and you have people who are interested in culture and who think it's not always right what they do, you know. That's for sure. So you could do some local things, you know, where you think I can change something locally. But really the problem is the top, you know. I was asked in 91 by Mr. Franz Fischler, who then became commissioner, and he was minister, and he asked me to change the Austrian state forests. And the first thing we did, because it was a state agency before, hanging 100% on the state budget, always positive in the results, but it was clear that you cannot, it was clear that it is more than a state agency. It is a commercial entity with environmental, a lot of environmental duties. And so what I did then it took some years, because it was politically sensitive in Austria, because the Social Democrats said, no, we want to have it as a state agency because then we have total influence from the parliament. And we said, you can have the influence, but let's make a shareholding company, which is all the shares owned by the state, of course. No privatizing, a shareholding company. And I made a proposal with 2 or 3 lawyers from Austria, from Vienna, and the office of the Prime Minister and the Minister of Agriculture. We made a shareholding company, which in '96 was voted by 2/3 of the parliament to implement a shareholding company. But the shareholding company did not get the assets. It is just a management company, a management shareholding company. And what we got was a capital, because as a management company, you need capital. That means we got something, you know, it's 860,000 hectares, and we got something like 50,000 hectares. We got some houses in Vienna that we have a capital as a shareholding company, but we were just running the state forests for the state. And our shareholding company is 100% owned by the state. And for any activities on land buying and selling, I need the parliament. So at year end, whenever we did a lot of buying and selling because it makes sense, you know, because We were in villages, we were in towns, we were in the countryside, we were in ski resorts and mountains and everything. So there's always something to do if you have such a big estate in trading land. But when land trading was done, it went into a special account which could not be used by us, but only used for buying land again.
Right. Yeah.
So a shareholding company with very strict rules, but we could run it like the owner for the state. And there is a supervisory board where the most important employee of the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry is sitting, where the finance minister is sitting with his employees, and then 2 or 3 specialists, you know, and the employees, because the employees also are represented by law on a shareholding company, you know. And I was a CEO. I had a financial director, and we were running it as if it would be a private company, always under the umbrella of the state, always under supervision of the state, always in the benefit of the state. And we could nothing. What culture does, what I heard, you know, that they are selling, for example, timber through a Swiss company, you know. Yeah, you know, where Bertie Ahern has been present, you know. If I would have done that, I would have gone to jail, you know, to jail, yeah. So very clear, the first thing is you have to have very clear rules. And then you look for the management and the supervisory board, and everything works. The problem of culture is the state does not give culture clear rules. And that's why we are sitting here, and that's why the NGOs are all working on it. And the question is, the main question is, can you do any influence, you know, with getting together with the NGOs who think like you and make a concrete proposal with a lawyer in Dublin, taking examples of other European state forest entities, just make a proposal and send it to the parliament and say, look, that's how the biggest asset of the state of Ireland should be managed, you know. That is one of the approaches. Your approach on the local side is good.
Yeah.
Go on.
They need to complement each other.
Go on. But real changes will come when you change the top, when you change the rules, when there are clear rules that are kind of how we did it, you know, because what we did is an example for all Europe. I did then consultancy for Czech Republic, for Croatia, because everybody saw that all over Europe, state forests are very important as an asset for all the states. Germany, especially the Eastern European, Romania, Bulgaria, Croatia, Slovenia, they all have big state forests, and they all have the same problem what we have, you know, that they are sometimes not managed properly. And then in 1996, 97, we have been an example in Europe, you know, and it's still working because it's very clear, very transparent, it's very clear objectives, it's very clear duties. The management cannot just do something hidden. Everything is discussed in the parliament. The budget is supervised, like shareholding companies, by the supervisory board, by state entities. Two ministries are sitting on board with important employees from the ministries to watch it. Very clear, and then it works, you know. The problem is you have to have good rules on the top, and so I would just give you the advice. Think about changing the big picture, and the same. Try to be on the local side and do what you can on local side. That's the only thing I can say. And you know, for example, it's also strange that the Farmers Association is not with you. Is with culture. Forest Service, which should supervise, is with culture. Now we have in Austria a Forest Service, and they are supervising the state forest like every private forester. You know, this is in Ireland all a little bit one soup. You know, and that's a bit the problem.
Yeah. Just in Austria, what's the split between public forest and private forest? What sort of proportion of the forest estate would be privately owned? compared
Yeah.
to?
I think the Austrian state forests in terms of the forestry in Austria are managing something like 10%, something like 10% of the forest, because the biggest bunch of forest is managed by farmers and private companies like ours. So it's at least less than 20% what the state forests are managing, and 80% is managed by privates, and all of them are supervised by the Forest Service, who is responsible in the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry. They are following the forest law, and the Forest Service is reporting to the ministry, and they are checking all around. So they go around all the time, and you have to have contact with them if you do something. If you, I mean, in Austria, a clear cut more than 1 hectare, more than half a hectare, I need the Forest Service. More than 2 hectare, I would need the ministry. So nobody's cutting 2 hectares in Austria and going to Vienna to ask the ministry. You know, that's the rules. That's the rules.
The figure is in Ireland. There is a figure in the Code of Best Forest Practice that basically says there shouldn't be any clear felling greater than 25 hectares.
Yeah.
But they're still licensing fells for greater than 25 hectares.
Yeah.
I think one of the issues is because Quilcha owns approximately 50% of the forest estate, it does control the general direction of the industry more than maybe would be the case in Austria, because it just controls.
But tell me, what is really the situation of the Forest Service in Ireland? What is the Forest Service?
How long have we got? The Forest Service, to me, has a very conflict.
To whom do they report?
They're within the Department of Agriculture. It's the department. So there is now a Minister of State who has a sort of a general oversight of the Forest Service, but ultimately the Minister of Agriculture is the minister who would cover the Forest Service. But they have almost a conflicting role in the sense that they are promotional. They're trying to promote forests, and they're trying to promote more planting of forests, but they also have a regulatory role as well. So they would be involved in giving approval for afforestation, approval for forest roads, for felling licenses, for aerial fertilization. So you have this potential conflict of interest between a body that is directed to increase afforestation targets, but also regulating where those forests would go. And you can imagine a situation whereby the numbers for afforestation aren't as high as they would like. There is certainly a perverse incentive there for them to approve afforestation in areas where maybe they shouldn't be afforested. One of the things very interesting about Ireland, and I saw a map fairly recently, was Ireland, obviously, if you go back far enough, would have been covered in woodlands. You know, after the Ice Age, a lot of Ireland would have been covered in forests and woodlands. You look at a map of where wasn't covered by forests after the Ice Age, which would most the peak. That's exactly where the forestry has been targeted, on the lands that never grew trees before, and rather than trying to reforest some of the agricultural lands that were previously forested, the forestry sector has gone in for targeting the easy pick of the bogs. I don't know if you saw recently, but there've been a couple of fairly major bog slides in relation to, well, I don't know if it's necessarily forestry, but wind turbines which are being constructed on lands that were afforested, blanket bogs that were afforested.
You know, another question coming up with the forest strategy in Ireland is the question of nurseries who are producing alternative species. You know, that would be also a duty for culture if they would be involved. Here in Europe, there are a lot of private companies doing that. So we have the possibility to choose species here, which are produced. I must say, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, an estate like mine always had its own nursery, which we don't have anymore. but we have nurseries, we have the possibility to choose species. And the question is, who is producing it? Because if we are talking oaks and the likes, you need to have a nursery which is producing the trees, and that's also a question that should arise. How produce, if you want to be diverse, where do we get the plants from?
I mean, there is a big nursery in Wicklow, None So Hardy, which seems to produce a large amount of the commercial plants.
The private.
It is a private, yeah. Quilcher used to have, probably still does have some small nurseries, but I know for the hedging work I do, I used to get plants from Quilcher nurseries, and they stopped producing certain ones. Like I used to get holly for planting into hedgerows, because holly grows very well in existing hedgerows because it's very shade tolerant. I used to get holly through Quilcher. Their nursery stopped growing holly over 10 years ago, actually, now probably. It does seem to be more of a reliance on a few large nurseries for producing stock.
Well, anyhow, there is something.
Yeah.
And I think it's better in private hands, of course. I agree. Yeah, of course, the private nurseries would benefit if a lot of people buy alternative plants from alternative species from them.
Yeah, I know. I'm interested in looking at old maps, and if you look at the old Ordnance Survey maps from the 1830s, 1840s,
yeah,
most of the big estates would have had an area that would have been earmarked as a nursery. You can see old maps, and if you read old RDS documents from the early 1800s, all have been local nurseries all around the country, whether they were growing trees or hedging plants or whatever. They were everywhere. You wouldn't have had it all concentrated in a few big players. There would have been lots of local nurseries, and I think that you would get that native provenance, that local provenance, which can be important for species. I know from my own work on hedgerows, the primary species for hedgerows in Ireland and in most places would be Crataegus, the horned whitethorn. There's so much genetic diversity within that species that to just say whitethorn is almost meaningless. You've got whitethorn that will grow well in upland areas. You've got whitethorn that will grow well in lowland areas. And it's not just a matter of having the right species. Sometimes it's having the right provenance of the species.
Sure. Provenance. Sure, it's all about provenance, yeah.
And that goes into that key word that I brought up earlier on of diversity, that it's not just diversity of species, diversity within species as well, that we don't just tie ourselves to a few strains of particular species of trees that maybe have great commercial qualities but don't tick the boxes for some of the other qualities. Disease resistance, the pine weevil, for example. And we have a huge problem in Ireland now. I don't know what the situation is in Austria, but with the ash dieback disease.
We have the same. We have the same. I'm losing the ashes in my forests, and we even have to speed up to cut them when they are dead, because they could fall down and damage cars. But the first species we lost was elm.
Yes. Yeah.
In the 60s, we had beautiful elm in my forest. We lost the elm, and now we are losing ash, which is a disaster for us because it's a very important mixture tree in our mountain forest. And we are losing it in an enormous speed.
Yeah, one of my concerns with ash in Ireland is because my work has been a lot focused on hedgerows, and I would have done hedgerow surveys in 12 different counties. Ash is a hedgerow tree in nearly 50% of the hedges of Ireland. We lose ash, we lose the landscape. The landscape is going to change significantly.
Catastrophe.
You mentioned a very important point there that I've been banging on about for the last number of years since ash dieback was first detected. So many of our roadside hedgerow trees are ash. And if we look at it and deal with it as fire brigade action, when the tree trees are diseased and gone, it's going to be an extremely expensive problem.
Sure. Yeah.
Looking at it now, doing the assessment now, and saying, well, look, this one looks like it's going to succumb, and maybe trying to take out the ones that are going to be a big problem if they become badly diseased. And let's start a replanting initiative to try and make sure that we know we're going to be losing trees from the hedgerow. Let's try and find alternative species that we can say, well, at least let's maintain some degree of hedgerow trees in the landscape. Such a huge feature. Hedgerow trees are a huge feature of the Irish landscape.
Okay, so what do you think? What can I do now for you, or what could be make our contribution to what you're doing? Because we got the contact, and I enjoy very much that we have now somebody else who is on the same road like we are in Ireland, and of course, when we are in Ireland, we would like to meet you. We would try to do that. For the tree festival now, is there anything I can do for that, or what do you think?
I think you need to speak to either Ema or Natalia, as to they are organising the tree festival. I was sort of drafted in to talk to you.
Yeah.
The way that you've been drafted in to talk to me, so I'm not really. I'm sort of. Just said I'd speak to you because I want to do something that I feel like I want to try and move things in a positive direction. As I say, I've been doing a lot in terms of fighting against the current system, and I want to do something to lead towards that brighter future, the light at the end of the tunnel. And what you're suggesting there is, what we really need to be doing is collectively putting more.
Yeah. You have to get together, all people who think like you, who act like you, with the NGOs. You have to get together, and you have to make your strategy, and you have to be able then to put out a message which is heard from the parliament and from the ministries. That's the key. You should get attention. And attention means that you put together your forces, and make a meeting, and I think you just put together your ideas how culture should be structured and should be working. But first of all is always the strategy. The strategy, structure follows strategy, make a strategy, and always keep it short and simple. 3-4 bullet points. What should be the objective of them? And then, of course, also due to the experience you have with culture now in Ireland, to put it into a kind of a public framework where they have to be transparent, and where they are really acting as for the Irish public, for the Irish country, as managers managing the biggest asset of the Irish state. But try to get together your forces, because I think if you can get the attention. It's just you don't have so many shots. You have to have a good shot, first shot, with the structure, and maybe I can help you with that. I'm not so much into the total structure now, but I told you how I think you understood how simple and straightforward our structure is. Our structure has been in Austria.
Yeah, one of the problems that I see is there's been so much of a move down that route towards Sitka spruce that there are a lot of vested interests that have big investment in that.
Sure.
And they are always going to be reluctant to change it. It's how we can transition and get those people who have invested in the Sitka spruce model. How can we get them to see that there is another future where they can still be able to
Sure. You cannot break and finish everything what has been done the last 30-40 years. But the problem in Ireland, as I remember, is that they even don't follow their official strategy, because what I told them in Ennis is that with the broadleaf trees, you are counting any hedge and rose that's standing on the road and putting it into your account as a diversity. That's a little bit the point. So not even their own strategy they are following, and nobody is taking them account, that's a bit the problem, but clearly you cannot change everything from today to tomorrow, but you should have an idea, a proposal, how to change, how to get on the road. And all the environmentalists in Ireland should be with you, all the environmental people should be with you. And the question is to get these people together on a table and make a proposal and try to get the state and the Minister of Agriculture moving, just to get them moving. Maybe usually in Austria, these people go in the parliament to the different parties, because there is in every party somebody who is environmentalist or environmentally interested, or even the Greens. The Greens are an environmental party, and they go to the deputies and say, look, the government is not moving, the minister is not moving, but that would be our proposal to change the things in Ireland. So in Austria, they just go to deputies, and you hear it in parliament. And if I would have done something really wrong, it would have been a discussion in parliament, of course.
Right. See, we're almost in a situation that's moving away from where we want to be. I don't know if you're aware, but the new legislation was introduced a couple of months ago, back at the beginning of October, that's actually making it more difficult for communities and the public to input into the Forest Service to try to say in terms of influencing the licensing process. Previously, anybody could make a submission on a forestation proposal or a felling license. Now, everyone wants to charge people to have their say on anything. And also, if you want to appeal against a decision that the minister's made, there's now a fee of €200 per application. So if you live in an area like I do, where there could be 10, 11, 12 different applications in a small radius, you can imagine that if you're not happy. I mean, where the land that we have, although it's not the bit nearest to the house, it's on the furthest bit from the house. The road is on a harvest route for Quilcher's huge plantations up the road. So every stick of the timber that comes out of that forest comes down the road past our place. And to have a say in anything that's going on in that regard, it would cost me €20 each application to have a say, €20 even to see the paperwork. And then if I'm not happy with what's going on, it would cost me €200 to appeal each individual license. That's not a system that's working for communities and get necessary transparency and accountability. It's almost trying to push aside transparency.
Yeah, it's a problem. It's a political question. That's the problem. Yeah. How can you get political people? How can you get attention by the political responsible people on county level first of all, and then on national level? That's a huge problem. Usually, NGOs they send around pictures and they communicate via the internet, and so this is the kind. Of course, you have to apply, so to say, modern methods to get attention.
Yeah.
But the best is always to get a lot of people together in an area and make noise. That's the best. Yeah.
Yeah. I know. To be fair to the group here, there is a community group here in Leitrim, Save Leitrim, who have been doing a lot of campaigns locally, and they've pushed and pushed and pushed for a meeting with the minister to talk about these issues, and successive ministers, and there's been 3 or 4 of them, none of them have engaged with the groups.
Yeah. And then is the question of you get groups in other areas with whom you can get together. Maybe if 2 or 3 groups from other areas get together, it's more attention. I know, I have a feeling, and we have an experience with the Irish structure, and they are stubborn and they don't move, and if you don't push them, they don't move a millimeter. But I think the public, the general public, with communication, with getting people together, making noise, sending emails, whatever, just being nasty. It's the only possibility, I think.
Yeah, we can be nasty politely.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, I agree that there's a lot to do, and it isn't something that's going to be sorted out overnight.
No.
And, I mean, one of the things that is always of concern, like the forest industry says that there are 12,000 people employed in the industry.
Yeah.
You know, we don't want to draw a line and tell those 12
No.
people you are now.
Employ more people to get diversification, you know. I mean, it's easy to say that more intense forestry needs more people to look after the plantations, to produce the plantations, to look after the plantations, to make thinnings. So Sitka is very simple. It needs not so much people. If you go in diversity, you need more people, you know. That's also something you can prove.
That's a really, really good point, because at the moment, you know, there's a clear fell going on near to me. There's one guy driving the harvester, there's one guy driving the forage, and there's a team of people driving the lorries that are transporting the timber.
It's like agriculture.
Yeah.
It's like grain harvest, corn harvest. Mm-hmm.
And as you say, the more diversity, the more diversity employment as well.
Yes.
So
with Ima, you know, we can always catch up again. Yeah. And you send me also your contact, and we stay in contact, and we see if we can do something. We try to be helpful, and if we are in Ireland, we would tell you when we come, so that we could maybe have also meet in person and keep on with our discussion. That's all what I can do as a contribution for the moment, you know. That's
appreciated, Richard. I understand. I mean, you've got some really, really useful experience there in terms of operating at a different level to the level that we're operating on, and as you say, that's to affect the sort of the degree of change that's required. It needs a big input at the top.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, thanks very much.
All right. So, all the best to you. All the best to you. We keep contact. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
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 Bye-bye.